You don't want communication to be too intimate, but at the same time, you don't want it to be impersonal.
An individual will typically look up and smile as a way to say, wow, I've been here for the last 4 hours and not one person has done that, right? And so they're connecting with you. The essence of the challenge to the human spirit, to the human condition, is the same in the bush in, faraway Tanzania as it is in Cleveland, Ohio. I'm capturing the story of a Francesco in a way that doesn't feel flat or static, or I've heard this story 1,000 times, right? And if I'm going to do that, I really have to be an explorer of you. I have to be an explorer. I have to approach you as if no one has asked you these questions before.
In everyday life, it's rare and it happens. And you're like, oh my God, this is what communicating is supposed to feel like? This is amazing. I want to do more of this.
So many people live with an agenda that they're coming and asking you for something, but they're really not. They've got an agenda. They want to check a box. I think there's a false sense of security in the pursuit of being the lead character in everything that we do.
It keeps so many people back.
Yeah, because they forget about the journey. They forget about all the steps along the way that get them there. We're stimulus rich and context poor.
Rod, before we had books, phones, or even cities, we had stories. From cave paintings to mythologies passed down by firelight, storytelling has been with us over tens of thousands of years. Today, it powers everything from multi-billion-dollar films to political campaigns and personal brands. Why do you think storytelling is so deeply wired into us human beings?
Wow, Francesco, I love that question. Top of my head, just the way in which you frame that question, I think it's because stories innately package emotion with them. And it's that emotive element of story that pulls us in. It's like I was on a recent interview and the host is a musician and quite accomplished. And he just said, everybody has a relationship to song, to music, right? It's unique to them. And I think the same goes for story. And it gets laid out in different, ways when we're young. And we then I think we follow a path, right? It's a repetition. It's something that's a part of us. If we were lucky enough to have a parent that read to us, that's the initial relationship around story. And if those stories and experiences evolved into sharing sort of verbally a story of their own when they were young, you start to connect the dots, right? And if you don't have that, maybe you turn to it's television and it's movies and it's, now social media in ways in which we can sort of have these micro stories where in an instant, there's going to be a beginning, a middle, and an end. And it's either going to make me laugh, it's going to make me want to learn more. It might make me angry or cry or have some emotion that is quite deep and substantive. But we have an opportunity to engage in stories everywhere. And so that's maybe a bigger, broader way to respond to your question. But I think that there's an emotional component that is tied to story, right? There's something, whether it's the storyteller or it's the content, something gave me enough confidence to stand up in front of the room or stand up on, a box in a public square and share something. And I probably am going to share that because I'm emotionally connected to it. Something has changed in my life or something needs to change. And when we communicate with emotion, for whatever reason, our Homo sapien brains, the radar pings and we say we need to listen because we don't know if it's an alert or it's something that we want to cast our eyes upon. So I really think it starts with emotion and it really ends with emotion. I mean, this is why some of us love the power, the beauty, the majesty of sports and, the agony of defeat. And at the end, we know that we've been on some roller coaster and we feel as if we're affiliated with them. Or it's a great piece of music or an artist. There's something that comes out in what we see and how it changes us.
Nice. Yeah, of course. And since emotion can be found in everyday life, so can storytelling. It can be found on the story that you say on the date. It can be found on the story, on the gossip, because that's storytelling as well. On the gossip that you say about the new guy at work. It can be, oh, my mate from high school posted this whatever new post. Oh, well, look, she has a kid. And like that's also in a way storytelling that puts us in this emotional roller coaster every day, and that just shows how ingrained storytelling is in every single thing we do. Is integral to human civilization, really, because most of the time we don't just remember facts, but put a story behind it, and then suddenly everyone pays attention. And for what? Let's go back to peasants and kings. For the majority of human civilization, no one could write or read. So how would information be passed down? By stories.
That's right.
We make stories. Even, in my opinion, even religion and the Greek gods, they were just stories to make sense of the world.
Yeah, they help us to understand those things that we can't explain, or it invites us in. And to the earlier part of your commentary there, I mean, right, it's that story can also serve an objective in a discrete period of time or moment where, especially now, right? I mean, Daniel Pink, who I'm a big fan of, a New York Times bestselling author that, I think is renowned worldwide. I had the pleasure of being interviewing him, I should say, and the honor of doing so a number of years ago, and I've kept up with him. But he talks about life that we've got, we're stimulus rich and context poor. So we have stories everywhere at our
Mm-hmm.
disposal, and we see them now in feeds. I mean, we don't know, how would we have known what the term feed meant, right? Or real, or, I mean, look, then it's overt, whether you're on Facebook or Instagram, it's the story that you're going to be putting up, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it gives you a 60-second runway to be able to convey something that you want to share with people, either to move them in one direction, bring them closer to you, um, and or I guess communicate sort of the role that you're playing in the current act of the story that you live. So that is the benefit. Right now, there are a lot of, I think, downsides to the amount of, the stimulus being stimulus rich, as Daniel Pink rightly says. Um, and it's all about context, right? And knowing how we can convey information in a way that hopefully is meaningful for people.
So, out of so many stories that you hear, is there one that lives in your brain rent free, or something that is there a grand story that every now and then you think back at, and maybe, I don't know, maybe laugh, smile, cry, whatever makes you feel?
Ah, I will tell you, I am, and this is a quality that I wish I could change, or sort of my own, um, sort of DNA. I'm always looking and excited about what's next around the corner that I don't know from a story. So I am a prisoner of the moment often, right? So if I've just heard a
Mm.
great story, that'll be front of mind. But when you ask me, I'll try to be a good guest here on your show, Francesco, and respond to a story that, you know, oftentimes it's the things that I feel, or it's the people that I didn't get a second chance to learn more about, or that they were so impactful in a very short period of time that I think, wow, what would it have been like if I could have more, right? Um, there's a gentleman in my book, The Narrative Edge, that I talk about, and it was an interview that I did a few years ago, and I want, in the moment when I secured him as a guest, it didn't really hit me, right? And how could it? Because it's hard to understand a life lived after decades by reading somebody's biography on a one sheet,
Yeah.
or the inside flap of one of his books. But I interviewed a Vietnam veteran, and he shared this incredible story where he had almost died in Vietnam, and as he was being basically wheeled into the Quonset hut, he was asked by a nurse what religion he was, and he didn't understand in the moment, obviously because he was near death, what was going on. And he said, well, why? And she wanted to know, basically, so they could get either a pastor or a preacher there, right, bedside, from a last rites perspective. And when he looked up at her, he hadn't seen a woman in some time. And he recalled to me with a gravelly voice, because he still to this day had the permanent damage physically, to his throat, his windpipe makes him sound as if he's grasping for his last breath with every
Mm.
breath he takes. Um, he looked up at her and asked her to kiss him, as if it was a great Hollywood movie, from
Mhm.
the 30s or 40s or something like that. And then he just remembers that the pentothal hit, the painkillers, and he
All right.
obviously passed out. Now, the reason why that story has sat with me for quite some time, and I've developed a friendship with him, is because it was so powerful. And sometimes people extend they show the vulnerability of their story in a way that you almost feel as if you should extend a thank you or a thank you card, because it's such a great reminder that we can really make an impact on other people around us if we give them sort of the full sense of the story. And he did that with me, and he didn't have to. I was
Mm.
curious, I poked around, and he shared it in a way that, I've used it even when I've been speaking. I've used it on stage because I know how powerful it is. And to see an audience listen to that clip is quite an experience. And so that story sits with me. Um, and sadly, that nurse was actually quite famous because she ended up being she was the only female service member that was killed by enemy fire in Vietnam. And so it was just such a bow to a story where, if anything, I'd like to know more about her story, and
Hmm.
honor that at some point in time. But for me, Francesco, it's always, when I think about things like that, or if I'm asked, like as you did just now, I think about how do I connect and add to that story in a way that honors it from a point of dignity. In
Hmm.
that, will I co-write something with that gentleman? David is his name,
Maybe
Holdridge,
you should.
right? And see what is there. So it's really about what is next, because it's fun to be surprised. I just think it's absolutely incredible because, and I think when you open yourself up to that with story, one of the benefits no one will talk about, I don't even know if people can put words to it, is that
Hmm.
if you're open to sharing stories and allowing other stories to come in where it's not just about you, um, you start to see yourself and other people and experiences and sort of these timelines that are just a little bit different, right? And so it's, you know, seeing myself and you and your podcasting and your show back when I was sort of in the earlier chapters of my work, and having a great affinity for your commitment to quality and questions and curiosity, right? That's a
Hmm.
fun from me. It's a fun walk down memory lane that you haven't even asked, but I get to experience during this show. And so I think that's the exchange. That's the volleying, like we're playing pickleball or tennis or something like that, where if you find people that you can share stories with and that you allow stories to be shared with you, wow, the benefit, the payoff is absolutely incredible, just for your spirit, for who you are and the way in which you think about the world around you and the impact that you can have.
As you were saying that now at the end, I was just thinking, what kind of stories am I going to be telling my children or my grandchildren? And for those awesome stories to happen, you just need to live life at its fullest. Just be bold. Just go there and create stories. Because stories don't happen by themselves. You can read all about them in books, but how about to experience them, as you just said, to be part of these stories, part of someone else's and them of yours. And yeah, I just had that thought, like, I need to be making cooler stories at the moment.
But you know what? Look, it's sort of like using the example of a school play, right? You're a young student, and you've been assigned. You're the lead role, Francesco, and I am the oak tree that stands in the corner. That's fine. Maybe for the chapter of life that I'm in fourth grade, and this is what we're sort of doing.
Hmm.
And I'm learning about the stories and the people and the personalities around me. And it doesn't mean that I'm going to be the oak tree that's in the back corner for the rest of my life. But I do think it's important to understand that we're not beholden to one role, right? We
Yeah.
have hopefully the opportunity, and I say that without um, understanding that not everybody is afforded the same rights in ways that I wish that they were. But life can be cruel in different places around the world, and in stages, and in different environments. All things being equal, we have an opportunity, hopefully, to be able to observe the stories in real time that are playing out on that stage of life, and experiment and try different ways in which to contribute the voice that you have. And you might find that you'll turn around and say, I didn't even plan for it, but I am now playing a different role. I'm no longer the oak tree. I'm a supporting character to Francesco on stage. And
Mhm.
I'm learning a lot about myself. It's like there's a gentleman that's a friend of mine out of the Nordics who I think quite highly of. And he understands his role in sort of the play or the musical of life. He knows that he's a really fantastic number two to a leadership team or a
That's
leader,
nice.
right? He just understands there's a comfort, but there's enough of I guess, a degree of energy, of vibration that stimulates him in the way in which he needs to be creative and discerning in the way in which he provides advice and collaborates with groups. And I think that it's such a great lesson for me. I'll speak for myself. I don't know about how you experience those kinds of things, but you know, I think there's a false sense of security in the pursuit of being the lead character in
Yeah.
everything that we do.
It keeps so many people back.
Yeah, because they
Yeah.
forget about the journey. They forget about all the steps along the way that get them there. And that basically those points, those stop off points in a trip or a journey, it's like they're offering, it's like a video game. Like you can go and get, they're gold coins at each stop. But too often we're bypassing that and hoping that we can get to our destination with enough gas in the tank to experience and realize whatever that is or was that we were pursuing.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not only the stories we tell to others, but also the stories we tell ourselves.
Oh,
I
great
wonder,
point.
what has been the most impactful story you've told, or perhaps you still telling yourself, that got you where you are in life today, either positive or negative?
Yeah, I mean, the story that that I still tell myself today. I will say this: it is a constant, which maybe I think is a good thing, right? There, it can be sort of this productive conflict within myself, where I and sometimes I over index this, where I'm still amazed at the people that I get to spend time and talk with. I don't, to the point where I'll have friends and family say things like, "Yeah, we get it. It's another big guest," or like, they're incredibly accomplished, or right. Um, and so I balance between that, and because the advice that I'm getting from friends and family is, you're on the same level as those people, right? You should like embrace that and drive forward, whatever that means. Maybe that's a Western mentality. I don't know. So I will constantly think about that story of that I tell myself, that I'm still that kid that is curious, that feels things deeply. And as such, then I hope that I sort of weave that into the storytelling that I participate in. But it is a delicate balance, right? Because there are moments, at least for me, when I am in an environment where I'm hoping to capture stories, or that's sort of the objective, where you want to be able to be confident and lean into your skill sets and the things that you have worked very hard over a period of years to hone in from a skill level, and yet still be organic and surprised. That's a constant sort of teeter-tottering act that I have to go through. So, some might say the derivative of that is sort of a confidence level in what I'm trying to do, but it's in that vulnerability and never thinking that I'm that guy, in quotes, I'd like to think helps me. And I don't ever want to come across as that guy, as we would say in the US, because to me, that's an endpoint. You know, that guy to me is when they're reading that I'd passed away or something like that. I don't want that shouldn't be a part of, I think, the story to be that guy. If people find accomplishment in what we've all been doing, great. And that's nice. And that can maybe fuel some of the challenging times you know, where we don't get the applause, or we don't have the people rooting us on, where we need something from somewhere and we just can't see it in plain sight, right? And sometimes that will help us. So yeah, that's a constant story that I battle, is that notion of keep pushing. Where some might say, "Well, you've already achieved some level of accomplishment, you should be good," that and you should take that into the way in which you operate on a daily basis. But for whatever reason, in this lifetime, I will constantly be aware of that. And sometimes I will be expressed in my own insecurity in the ways in which I think about if I'm doing what I'm hoping to do. And sometimes prevents me from maybe celebrating wins that I just should take the time and smell the roses, right?
Yeah, I can relate to a great degree with this. Is anyone who is a little bit ambitious has that in them, just constantly eating at them. Like you can stop, you can celebrate, you can't.
That's
Uh,
right.
it, it
It's like the pebble in your shoe as you're walking, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Trying
yeah,
to enjoy a
exactly
beautiful
that.
walk, and you feel it and you try to ignore it, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what it feels like. Yeah, it's just that small annoyance, but you let it be. You kind of it's like you let it be because maybe you want that little push, maybe you want that little reminder of you keep going, but yeah, maybe you need that little reminder.
Yeah.
I remember last time you were on, you were telling me about your travels in Africa and everywhere, and I wonder, out of all of the stories from all these different countries that you've been, have you noticed any common themes among the stories that people tell about their identities? Like these internalized stories. Have you noticed maybe common things worldwide?
I think, boy, if I boil it down, I will first talk about my reaction. I mean, there have been plenty of times, and sort of foolish of me to think otherwise, or why would I be surprised by this? But there are plenty of times where I'm in arenas or areas, or in the bush in Africa that I've been, where I think, the problem that I've just heard through a story, or the challenge that this individual is going through. Sure, the details are different because they just would be, when different stories are separated by thousands of miles and oceans apart.
Hmm.
Yet the essence of the challenge to the human spirit, to the human condition, is the same in the bush in, far away Tanzania as it is in Cleveland, Ohio, here in the United States, or someone in Bristol in England. I mean, it's those times where, and it's not that there'll be a specific phrase or a word that's used, but it'll be in which we talked about at the very beginning, sort of why story, right? There's an emotional connection and
Hmm.
packaging of words and emotions in a sequence where your brain triggers and says, "I've heard this before," in essence, or
Mm.
I've sensed this plot line, and
Hmm.
wow, I can't believe that I'm connecting now. My memory bank is sort of connecting, let's say, an investor or a CEO story to a grandmother of 18 who's talking about how many hours per day she walks just to get what I would say is semi-clean water. And that's being very kind to the word, semi sort of clean water. Um, those moments have been sort of like fireworks in my mind in when I have those experiences, because it sort of folds the universe in for me that,
Mm.
that CEO in New York lives an incredibly different, resourced, privileged life from a grandmother that, is struggling every day just to help provide for her grandchildren on her own. And and yet there's something about it that connects those dots. And so those types of things are always illuminating for me.
Mm.
But really, it just speaks to, you can't, here's the thing, Francesco, I don't think you can get to those types of, those moments of realization if you're not open to whatever it is that individual wants to share, in essence, that there's no agenda,
Yes.
right? I think so many people live with an agenda, that they're coming and asking you for something, but they're really not. They've got an agenda. They want to check a box. They need to be able to tell you
Yep.
something that will potentially motivate you to do something in a covert way, because they didn't have the language or the words to tell you this is what they needed you to do. So they manipulate, that's a very strong word, but let's just say that they move the deck chairs of the words and the prose used to motivate a team at a company, or a team on a field, right? Or a spouse, or younger children to do what you want, and, do their chores. So agenda plays a massive role, I think. And so to not have an agenda, I think, is a surprising and hopefully ultimately refreshing experience for the other person that just thought this story or this exchange was going to be like, dozens of others that they've had in a given week. Um, so it really goes down to that. It's, I think, people want to be heard,
Hmm.
And I also think they don't want to have to give you sound bites. Now we're talking within the medium of media, right? And podcasting here. But I think just the notion that people want to feel as if they are given the airspace to just relax within that and breathe for a moment. I'm not saying
Yeah,
they need minutes on end, but to feel a calm when they're in your presence so that whatever they want to share or story comes out authentically, right?
yeah.
It's vulnerability is the key. It's not the polish,
Number one, number
right?
one.
It's
But it
number one.
doesn't happen because this modern life, people are always going somewhere. No one has time to sit and listen. And when you do, as you just mentioned, people have this agenda. And when true communication happens, and it's rare, other than if you do it as your job, sure. But in everyday life, it's rare and it happens. And you're like, oh my God, this is what communicating is supposed to feel like? This is amazing. I want to do more of this.
Right. And
And then,
don't you think, Francesco, that's the opportunity, though? Right. Like to me, when you say that, that's the opportunity because people don't experience it in a regular sort of manner. That if someone, like right now, so many people are focusing on how to sort of understand storytelling. Harvard
mm,
Business Review, McKinsey just came out with a new report on CEOs need to be the chief storyteller. Like everywhere in business, they're understanding you've got to be able to convey a story. Brands are getting this. It's
yeah,
not just the product. People don't care. They'd probably take a product that's, 95% of what they want because they support the story of the brand
mhm,
and that company and what they're doing, then just let's say quote the best product under an umbrella of a brand that has no connection and or lacks purpose associated with their mission and vision. And so I think it's a massive opportunity, right?
it
This is why
is.
when you go to, it's funny because when I go to the grocery store and I'm checking out, or I'm at the pharmacy getting a prescription, I try to look at the person's name badge because I want to say, you know, Francesco, how are you doing today? Or, thanks a
Yeah,
lot. And I use your name. This is to your point about where people don't get that experience. It's always a nice point of connection because that individual will typically look up and smile as a way to say, wow, I've been here for the last 4 hours and not one person has done that. Right. And so they're connecting with you. So on the flip side of that coin, it's also quite a statement on society that, like, if anything, in a perfect world, which is not, that's just foolish. There's no perfect world. Uh, they wouldn't be surprised by using their name because everybody or a majority of people, right, use it. I don't know. I just some basic decorum and engage people in a
mhm.
way that in that moment says, I'm only focused on just in essence conversing with you for the 30 seconds it's going to take while we sort of manage through this transaction of medicine or groceries. But it all, and so to me, it's an opportunity, and it also says how much we're thirsting for it, right?
Oh, so much. That's why podcasting is so big. Okay, 5 years ago, who would have thought you're gonna be listening to 3 hours and a half of Joe Rogan? Who has 3 hours and a half? Yet people crave so much that raw conversation, and because they don't have it in their own lives, they at least listen to someone else having it. Because imagine how important it is. You could be doing anything. You could be playing video games or whatever. Go for a run, but you want to listen to other people talk. That's how much you need it. That you sacrifice your time to listen to other people having it. And going back to the brands that you said, which I want to ask you a question there. Um, if you have to look on some of the biggest corporations that excel at storytelling, either through advertising, either through, how they display their values and the purpose, as you just mentioned, and the beliefs, which companies are the best storytellers in your opinion? Which ones come to mind?
Wow, that's a big question, and it's one of those questions where, in the moment, what brand do I like or that speaks to me? I'll say
I
this: the needle for me moves, Francesco, more with smaller brands and or local companies when I see commercials on TV where it feels like they have leaned into and they've acknowledged that they have a community that appreciates what they offer. Let's say it's a restaurant. And that's the focus. It's not about them, it's about you, the diner, right? The patron. I always find that fascinating. And really the micro stories from the big brands. Look, the mistake that I think a lot of big brands make is that it's again, it's all about, us as the brand in a way that says,
Mm,
look at what we're doing that's so amazing. And you just know that the masses that are seeing this micro story or reel don't live the life that you are painting. It's that they don't have access to the same canvas or the quality of paints and
yeah.
paintbrushes. And so I think there's an inherent sort of chasm that is structured that doesn't need to be there. Um, I will just say that I'm impressed when I see brands that are okay with showing, in essence, both sides, right? The shiny side of what they offer that is incredible and it's going to change our lives, or it's going to be this combination of flavors that we've never had, and it's going to be, unbelievable. But that also show the story of how they got there, right? That doesn't treat people as if they were born already successful, right? Sort of that inside
Mm,
story. So sometimes I think those that have done really well. I'll tell you who, just from a branding perspective, professional teams around the world have really found a niche in documenting the behind the scenes, right? Not just the
mm,
stats or the highlights of a successful match the day prior, but the behind the scenes, like how did we get here, right? Why did we draft that player? How did we come to the conclusion that we wanted to hire this new coach? And they show you all of that, right? The behind the hidden
that's
camera stuff
cool.
kind of thing, right? That to me, it's like a subtle way of saying we struggle just like you guys do, right? We're just dealing with maybe these are different elements and different implications because we have millions of people watching to see, right? Our success metrics are very different. Um, and that behind the scenes, how we got there, I think we love it anyway. We know that. That's how, I mean, look, reality TV introduced us to that over 20 years ago.
Hmm, yeah.
And I think there are a lot of brands that are saying, you know what? Maybe it's okay if we show them how the sauce was made. So I'm a sucker for that kind of storytelling because I want to know. I don't, when it looks too perfect, if it's not like selling a technology, I think I just sort of pass on that because I don't think life is perfect.
Hmm.
And if I buy something and think foolishly that it's going to make my life perfect, I think that's sort of that's a you problem, meaning me, not you, Francesco. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right,
Man, the moment you said this, I remember. So I grew up in Greece, and then I spent a few years studying in Albania. And you have the Android versus iPhone thing, but that is exactly what it means back there. Because I remember growing up in high school, and if you had an iPhone, you were the rich kid. You were someone who we cannot even hang out. So people would think like this, like we are not good enough because of the storytelling that these products conveyed. Simply the phone you had could give you an indication. Could I hang out with these people or not? And like, no, they all have an iPhone. Like, why would they even talk to me? Imagine how powerful these brands are in shaping not only who's going to buy one, but society itself, how people interact. It's just insane.
yeah, it's lifestyle, right?
It's lifestyle.
Yeah, it's lifestyle. It's the perception of the lifestyle, right? I mean, I that's what's so interesting about brands and the stories that they tell. I think it's by accident, but that I don't know if they go into it as a plan. But I think that the consumer, the audience, will see
Yeah,
things
of course.
and actually extract from that that's that's an actual life story playing out in the people that are on the yacht and doing whatever they're doing, right? And celebrating and just everything is sort of copacetic. Um, and look, you don't want to live life in a way I think in a vacuum where you take everything so literal because that can be destructive in so many ways. But you also want to understand the field of play that you're participating on and the people that are playing within the context of that field. And so I think it's good to understand those messages, right? I mean, there will be
Yeah, yeah,
commercials or
yeah.
things that will happen, and I'll be with my kids. We'll be seeing something, or maybe we're driving to school and listening on the radio, or we're watching a television show, and it'll be just a subtle message. And we'll have conversations about, like, what are they trying to sell us here, guys?
Oh,
And
I
it's
like that.
fascinating to hear them say, and they're getting better at it just because I do that on a, semi-regular basis, especially if it's something where the messaging seems so overt and you think, or in the opposite, it's so subtle that they pulled you in and you didn't even know it.
Hmm.
Right? It's so savvy. But it's powerful, right? I mean, look,
It
we
is.
evolve in all areas of life, I think, in a lot of ways, and just from technology is an easy one to look at. And I also think we understand and evolve in the way in which we think about storytelling.
Yeah. How about individuals? Who are those people to whom you think are the most magnetic storytellers? When they talk, they can just captivate the attention, like they hypnotize the audiences. For me, comes Tony Robbins.
Tony
I don't know
Robbins.
about it. He's just like, when he talks, it's just so captivating, and then he can sell you anything. But who are some storytellers that really give you that same impression as perhaps Tommy gives to me?
So the people in general, I mean, I could go through a list of people, but I love watching interviews of accomplished movie actors and actresses and
Mm.
directors. One, I'm a film sort of buff, and I
Hmm.
sprinkle in movie anecdotes across the book, because I think people can relate to experiences through the stories that we see on the big screen. But what I enjoy about actors and directors, when they're asked questions, they automatically, or more often than not, work very hard to fill in the entire canvas of that question. So
What do you mean?
they don't take for granted that they can just say a few words to answer a question. They give you the full-throated reason why a decision was made, or the impact a scene had on them, or working on a film that was of consequence historically. They use their command of the language, I find, is above sort of the average, I think, communicator.
Mm-hmm.
uh, and they talk in very visual ways, which I think is very powerful. So it's, it's a little bit different if you're interviewing someone around like financials or something like that, right? Where they're, the balance sheet, or the quarterly report is the canvas that they are speaking from. You're talking to an actor or a director or a screenwriter, and you listen to them. For me, it helps to push the bounds of the way in which I think about conveying something. It's not even telling a story, really, it's just conveying something,
Hmm.
because they do it so automatically that you're I find myself immediately into what they're talking about. And it doesn't even have to be a very long clip, but I love the way in which they think about it, because in that profession, they are forced to think about characters, the relationship those characters have with themselves, with one another, within the context of whatever is going on, the protagonist, and the evolution of that story. And they have to
Mm-hmm.
then convey to you, the interviewer, or the audience, why they maybe made the choice they made, how they approached maybe a script, and then maybe how it changed them in the way in which they thought about themselves as being a vehicle to communicate story.
Man, that's so interesting. I never paid so much attention to it really, but now that you telling me about it, I look back and I see maybe some directors, and there's so much going on, and all these things that you were saying, that it just makes it so fascinating. You're right. So you learned a lot from them, I
Yeah, and look, I
assume.
mean, look at these algorithms. I mean, we bemoan these social media algorithms, and there's so much that I think we only obviously know the very surface level as the general public.
Mm-hmm.
But you search one time on like Facebook or Instagram, something around these, where they're either sharing a screenplay or they're talking about these things, and your feed will be flooded with more. Um, and so that's what my feed will get flooded with, and that's okay by me, because I may need 90 seconds of a story, or then I watch something in full because I'm interested, and I go and watch the full hour interview on YouTube,
Mm-hmm.
or I listen to it in an audio version. But yeah,
Mm.
I am drawn to that, because if I'm doing my job, I hope that I am capturing the story of a Francesco in a way that doesn't feel flat or static, or I've heard this story 1,000 times,
Mm-hmm.
right? And if I'm going to do that, I really have to be an explorer of you. I have to be an explorer. I have to approach
Right.
you as if no one has asked you these questions before. I don't care if you're in a committed relationship or your fan, but no one has put together sort of an observation about you, your energy, right? The things that you say, that you don't say. that's my obligation as I think, a storyteller. And you can do that. You don't have to be a storyteller or a writer like me or a podcaster like you and I. In that way, I think you can take that approach with your kids. I mean, it's really about slowing down, isn't it? It's sort of
Hmm.
about recognizing the energy in the room at a decibel level that we often bypass because we have everything else on our plate.
And from all this, because I know you've done hundreds of interviews and podcasts, what have you dissected from all these people? What is some things that you've learned from the people that interviewed you?
Oh, the people that interviewed me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I will say that it is quite an experience when you're on the other side of the microphone. I will say this, I have a great appreciation. I will say that I don't know if I'm how successful I have been at this thus far. Hopefully, I have been relatively successful. Is that and this is because of my of being on the other side, right? Normally, where I'm interviewing people, is that it really is it's a dance partner for that discrete period of time, right? It's another musician at a jazz club where you maybe came up on stage because we were missing, our bass player, and you're ready to go because we have an understanding, we have a shared sensibility about the way in which we convey the medium that we utilize, i.e., through music. And so it's that dance to me. There's an energy, and the podcasts that I love to listen to, there'll be a rhythm to it. Like if someone would ask me, I'd say, "Well, I love that show because there's a rhythm that I like. I understand that if
Interesting.
if there are two hosts and a guest, or just two hosts that are going back and forth regularly, they have a rhythm that I just think it's almost like saying that they're a good fit, right? They're a good dance partnership in that way, where you're watching in like ballroom dancing or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for me, it's been that to be very aware of the energy the host has, hopefully, understanding what their objective is, and then trying to be a good guest where, I'm appreciating the questions that are coming in, because I've been on the other side of it where
Uh-huh.
you ask a question, you think, wow, that was in your head. Wow, I really hit on something, right? And that individual is struggling to understand that it's a partnership. It's an unofficial handshake, right? Or wink wink contract between two people that says, I am going to engage in a way that says I'm present, I'm aware, I'm listening to you. So my appreciation for that has grown immensely. But really, for
Yeah.
me, I think about jazz, like just
Just,
jazz.
just jazz, baby.
That's right.
All right, all right. I want to move to your book, The Narrative Edge. Something I really agreed with you on, that is in the book. You wrote about the notion of vulnerability as strength, and that's very big. I might say how sharing authentic, sometimes even painful experiences builds trust. How it forges these deeper connections and allows others to see themselves in your story. Let's say someone who is trying to become a great storyteller, and he or she is trying to understand this, but has trouble gauging how much vulnerability it's okay for them to show.
Mm.
Because you don't want communication to be too intimate, but at the same time, you don't want it to be impersonal. What advice would you give that person? How can she understand how vulnerable to be?
So, love that question, Francesco. I would say less is more,
Less is more.
and never forget that silence and shared silence is your friend.
Shared silence.
Yeah, meaning that the fact that I wouldn't just immediately respond, let's say, to a question, or I'm trying to tell a story where I'm filling airspace. I think there's a notion that we think we have to fill the airspace, dead
Hmm.
airspace, right?
Yeah.
And but if you think about it, if I'm quiet for a moment, or if I'm writing a character, or I'm writing about somebody, and I even think to myself, I'm conveying an experience I had with somebody in real life, and I'm putting it into a book. I think I should be mindful of the way in which they are and the level of comfortability they have within themselves to sit in the silence.
Yeah.
Because just even asking that question really opens up a door to have an understanding about what is going on within that character, how whether or not you are, I think, honoring their life or what their story is. Um, and so silence is really big. I think that's one way, right? You don't, again, don't cheat the audience in putting everything in words to convey vulnerability, right? Because you make a good point. You run the risk of it coming across as a potentially that they are there's a victim mentality,
Hmm.
or that they need assistance and help in ways within or in their life outside of the challenge they're trying to overcome or succeed through action, right? So silence is really key, I think, and asking yourself as the writer or the person that's trying to understand that better, lean into that. Understand what happens when you don't have the answer, right? That's sort of the inverse of that. You know, how, shouldn't have a direct answer on how to be more vulnerable. It should be a little bit uncomfortable,
Right.
because within that is like this rich tapestry of understanding, really sort of like my approach to life or your approach to life. I'll get a
Yeah.
better understanding with someone if they struggle with answering a question or they don't just have the answer than somebody who has great talking points and is
Yeah.
incredibly polished. Because all that does for me is there's a bit of a bell that goes off in my head that says, wow, there is probably a wealth of interesting, compelling character traits underneath that veneer of perfection.
Yeah.
And probably laden with fear or some level of anxiety that they can't ever sway from that perception publicly that they have the answer, right? What
Because
happens when
they don't,
they
and
don't? We
they
don't.
don't. We don't. No one has. We cannot relate to perfection because no one is perfect.
That's
As
right.
simple as that.
That's right. That's right.
So we relate to the most, again, the most vulnerable, the most real things. Like, so me and the rich neighbor next door, I don't know how it is my Rolls Royce to be out of gas, but I know what it is to be anxious if that girl is gonna text. So it is these little things that make us human that we can relate on.
Yeah. And that is a point of connection, because when that happens, here's the great thing. Even if it's not a formal sort of engagement or a reason why I would be capturing your story, we're at a conference where we're somewhere social. It's a shared experience. We will remember one another much more likely because
Yeah.
of that vulnerability than being sort of, again, going back to that very US sort of phrase of being that guy, right?
Mm.
And that it was not being that guy and the vulnerability to be okay with that, that made the connection, so that then, in essence, like as an example, you would then maybe be more free to ask me questions about sort of the
Yeah. For sure.
technicalities of interviewing or something like that. Or I might be spending time with someone who knows or has had years of experience that I haven't around, I don't know, something with technology that I'm not good at. But they were vulnerable enough. It's like a window in, or it's a key to a door that says, ah, I can share, I can explore, and it's going to be all right.
Yeah. And do you think people are living a story they chose, or are they just living something they inherited from society, from the parents?
Wow, that is, I'm gonna use that if you don't mind. That's a great question.
Sure thing.
Or at least the way that you package that together, I really like that they inherited. I think that it's a little bit sort of like, where does the story start? It's if you've started a movie at home and then you have to pause it, you go about your day and you forget about it, and 2 days later you go back and you can resume where you left off. Some people's story starts off, I think, quite copacetic and quite nicely and smoothly, and other people's, it starts with a bang, and not in a good way, right? Something happens. They were born, inside a war zone, or there were complications of the million things. I just think that we inherit the stories that are a part of our DNA. And yes, they can impact the stories that we either tell, feel that we should tell, or have to tell, as a way to either pull people in because they feel some level of um, not pity, but there's a way to create sort of this pull, this magnetism,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
right,
know
to
what you mean.
a shared trauma or experience. Yeah, I don't think you can. It can be either or. I think it's an and, right? I mean, I think
Hmm.
that the power of it is, and some level of wisdom is achieved if you can understand the relationship of both.
Hmm.
Right. In a vacuum, how do I want to live my life? Okay. I don't live in a vacuum. So, how do I understand the story that I was put into, the role that I was cast as in the school play, if we use that example? And how have I gone about sort of rewriting or redrafting that story
Hmm.
to apply to my sensibilities, right? I mean, look at siblings, right? You can have siblings that have different levels of sort of pursuit or energy or angst, and you just kind of wonder,
Hmm.
wow, are they really siblings? Like they're so different. The one is
Hmm.
never takes no for an answer and is just clawing away 24/7. And the other one is much more relaxed and calm and into other pursuits that don't, I guess, require such vigilance. Um, and so you just don't know what story you're starting in. But I think it's about asking the questions to understand that story better. But that's the biggest challenge in storytelling. We can work on telling or crafting a story for our business or for, our sort of our present day life. But are we willing to read the story of our origin, our own origin story? And I don't think a
Hmm.
lot of people are, because it can be Pandora's box. That's the fear,
Hmm.
that if I open this up, I might find, well, I'm really like this parent, or I'm not, or
Yeah.
I really didn't stand up for myself in the way that I want, or, I didn't advocate for myself in a way that I wish that I would. And now I want that for my own kids, or those kinds of things. So I think it's really about awareness, and
Hmm.
through that awareness, there can be some authenticity that's expressed through the stories that you write today, tomorrow, and into the future.
Right. And there is a lot of unlearning that you need to do if you want to rewrite that story. Because if everything in your behavior and in your actions is in a way predisposed by the stories you've been told, which you didn't choose while growing up, then even if you try and rewrite, then you're going to rewrite it with the same material in a way. So you need to do a lot of unlearning of how they told you life is and how they told you you should behave and how they told you what you can or you cannot achieve. And these are learning, I'm learning lately, it takes silence and stillness. And you need to detach from these stories because the stories that come at you all the time from your friends, from your coworkers. And you need to go back and just draw back and think, okay, what do I need to unlearn so I can write the story in, as you said, what is best for me?
And I say this in the book, if I'm not if I'm not the author of my own story, who is?
Hmm.
Right? If I'm
Yeah.
not writing my own story, who is? And I think there are too many of us. And it's not something with an endpoint, right? I think it's a relationship. You develop a better relationship over time with your own story, to understand it, maybe not take it so deeply in the way in which it impacts you at certain experiences or environments, and or to give it more credibility and credence where you haven't in the past because you were really afraid to turn that sort of proverbial page. So
Page,
I
yeah.
hope that people get that in the book, and it's really about the audience. It's not about me. I hope that I've expressed vulnerability in a way that is authentic, and shows that I am far from perfect. But I do pursue story and the recognition of those that I hopefully have platformed in a way that is expresses dignity to the lives that they have lived.
Nice one. Right, Rod, last question for you. What do you want to be remembered for?
It kind of goes to what we're talking about here. I really hope, and this is going to sound very sort of crass and think, "Well, he's a guy that writes and he's been called sort of somewhat poetic and rhythmic in his writing." I just really want people to understand that I gave a rip. I really cared about the small stuff, even when it would become daunting and heavy to worry about the small stuff. But, but thinking and trying to understand and give light to the small stuff, in relationships and in the stories that I've worked really hard to capture and tell. Just that I give a rip. I know that there's probably a much better way to say that, but I care about the human experience and the sensitivities around that. And it's amazing when I think those things are acknowledged, what people can achieve and how they can then view their own story. So, but I appreciate it. I love coming on your show, and you ask me just the most thoughtful questions that make me think and makes me a better storyteller in person.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. And maybe we'll do another one soon.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you so much.